What's up, everyone? DJ Nubis here with you on the Metal Time Radio podcast with another episode of Vintage Cult Cinema. Today, my special guest and good friend Thrashpondo Pons is here to join me as we sit down and discuss a nice little 1971 film by Ken Russell called The Devils. Thank you for joining me, sir. I appreciate you being here as always.
It is an honor and a privilege. Love doing your shows, Anubis.
Thank you very much. So I can't really, I think the first time I ever actually saw this, and I do have it on DVD here, was probably 5 or 6 years ago. Now, I had seen some other Ken Russell films, obviously, but like Life Force and stuff like that. But when Shudder had this, when I watched, I was like, this is pretty intense. And I do love Oliver Reed and Vanessa Redgrave already as actors. But just for the time period that this was made, and obviously we're going to talk a lot about is how much of the envelope this movie pushed in terms of against like religion and sacrilege and stuff like that. So for you, can you remember the very first time you saw this and like what your overall impression was?
The first time I saw it was about 25 years ago. I was working in the video store. Shows how far back we're going. And one of my coworkers was a huge fan of, shall we say, avant-garde cinema. And he asked me if I had seen the movie The Devils. I don't know if I ever mentioned this. My degree years ago was in European history. And I've always kind of been fascinated with this particular period, sort of wedged between the Middle Ages and the Enlightenment, where you see the two crashing together with varying degrees of success. And he brought it over one like Sunday afternoon, and we watched it. And of course, he knew what an Oliver Reed fan I was. And I was like, it was like little bits of mind were all over the walls. I mean, this movie just blew me out of the water. It's a really, really, truly amazing film.
Yeah, and so, The Devils basically, again, 1971, directed by Ken Russell, stars Vanessa Redgrave, Oliver Reed, Dudley Sutton, also Michael Gothard, who, not too many people are familiar with him, but me being a big James Bond fan, he plays the villain Loke in For Your Eyes Only. So, like, when I saw him in this, I was like, oh, I know that guy. Unfortunately, he's been gone from us for a while now, so rest in peace for him. But very good actor. And he actually has a really cool role in this. It's almost like he's playing a witch hunter in some ways, back to the days of, like, Christopher Lee and them that would kind of do this kind of stuff. And, I'm sure you saw the same thing with his particular role.
Oh, definitely. In fact, I believe he's listed in the credits as Witchfinder.
Mm-hmm,
I believe. He also is, of course, Life Force. But one thing before I forget about it, speaking of this period, the 30 Years' War, he does what is possibly the only other movie I can think of off the top of my head, specifically set in the 30 Years' War, a movie called Last Valley with Michael Caine and Omar Sharif. He plays a mercenary. And it's sort of like Seven Samurai if it was set in pre-industrial southern Germany. I highly recommend this for everyone. I once did this film as a double feature with The Last Valley, and it works.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah, it's a really amazing film. But
I've never seen that, so I'm definitely going to look for that.
Add that to your list.
So this is 1770 France. Father Urbain Grandier, played by Oliver Reed, protection of a city of Loudun from the corrupt Cardinal Richelieu, I probably pronounced that wrong, is undermined by a sexually repressed nun's accusation of witchcraft. So this is definitely during the high time of nunsploitation, obviously. A lot of films came out around that time kind of dealing with that. And this one's no different. Like throughout the film, you see some crazy cinematography as well as the positioning. So there's one scene later where this young lady is basically stroking a candle and licking it as if it's a phallic. But that's only like one of the weird, crazy things that goes on within the film in terms of the sexuality. And again, Ken is definitely pushing the envelope in terms of shocking the audience, especially if you're during the time when you're conservative and Christian or whatever. This would be a movie you would not want to watch.
No, in fact, it was banned. Even when it's not being banned in many countries, many, shall we say, societies still forbid their people to watch it.
Yep. And so we've got obviously Redgrave here in the middle. So she is like sort of like the leading mother of a convent for nuns, and so but her issue is that she has like this hump, so she's been dealing with this growth, but she's a very interesting character because one, she deals with this, and she's also very strict and very, I guess, religious would be say the way to say it, but like all the other girls there, like they have this fascination with Grandier, who is, despite being like this Pope-like figure, is very much lusted after by just about every freaking female in the city, which is really kind of mind blowing because I just, when I went back and watched, I'm like, man, dude, he must have been under so much pressure not to get laid.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the cloister too, by the way, because, and Redgrave says this in one scene in so many words. Yes, a lot of women at that time did go into the holy order because of the devotion to God, but a lot of them, I mean, if you were in a big family and there were a lot of girls, dad was usually broke by the time he got to you, so they couldn't provide you with a dowry, so they stuck you in a convent, or perhaps they were, shall we say, disfigured in some way. The implication Redgrave is that her family stuck her in there basically because they were ashamed of her. And
Yeah.
But because she was so intelligent, she was able to work her way up. She certainly had her flaws. More about that later. But a lot of women in the nunneries weren't necessarily qualified or even wanted to do it. It was borderline a punishment. You saw that often in the military too, where a lot of people say, "Oh, it was the oldest son who went off to war." A lot of kids did, but a lot of times, boys joined the military just because there was nothing left of the family estate. They got forced into it. So there's a whole social angle, and of course that comes up later because the nuns, while they try to adhere to their order, initially they crack. And again, it was because a lot of them really weren't prepared for it in the first place.
Yeah. And the other thing that's very interesting about this film, and I'm going to try to keep the names of the characters straight, because you have whoever that guy is to begin. He's like King Louis, is that right? The one that's kind of doing the showboating on the stage.
I can't remember which one, but yeah, King Louis the something or other.
Looks yes. Like the 13th. So King Louis the 13th of France. Yeah. So and even they even approach him kind of interesting because if you go into the film, you would think that, well, this guy, he does these stage shows, but he dresses as a woman pretty much, cuts on the makeup and the glamour and the glitter, has like the bikini thing going on. So you almost like, it's almost like he's kind of figuring out his own sexuality in terms of, what he is and how he feels about himself. So, but then you got like this bridge and this guy with the cardinal who is trying his best to spread Christianity throughout the nation, but he's got this problem because of where obviously Grandier and Loudun is like this big fortress city that is basically within itself, but it does have a lot of influence on its own right. So the cardinal's always trying to use the king to kind of like push them out, but the king has like this loyalty to Loudun through other sources. The thing that I noticed the most about this was the use of underlying politics. And it doesn't matter what level it is. So whether it's the nuns, Grandier, the king, the cardinal, or even his subjects, like the leader of the soldiers and stuff, or the king and them. When Witchfinder comes, he's doing kind of the same thing everyone else is. He's pretending like he's got these answers how to like exercise Vanessa Redgrave's character, Sister Jeanne, like to exercise her. And so I love this scene later on where the king shows up, and this is when the Witchfinder basically spared the nuns from execution because he felt they were all possessed. So he's convincing them, all right, well, just strip away your nunnery, or what you want to call it, and go blasphemy and do whatever. And so they're inside this like chapel or church, and they're just kind of going nuts or naked, running around, being dirty. So the king shows up, and the king's like, all right, well, I'll help you kind of get rid of this. So he hands Gothard's character, Father Pierre Barre, this box and says, this is the blood of Christ. This, you can use this to cleanse these girls, these nuns, and bring them back to God. And when finally he does that, they all, like, Jeanne's like pretending she's cured. And then the king just kind of opens the box and there's nothing there. And they find out they've been duped. There's just nothing there. It's like the king was trying to show that your belief or whatever it was you thought you knew was fake. He just called him out on it point blank.
And the really important thing about that scene, I'm so glad you brought it up. And it's so funny. I don't know if you've seen I, Claudius, but I always thought that the character of Caligula in I, Claudius was borrowed directly from King Louis here, from the stage show to the foppish attitude to all that. But it illustrates something very important, that the king is actually very uninvolved in the day-to-day politics of the state. He farms that out to people. He's basically just a courtier. He basically just is sort of a figurehead who the nobles sort of gravitate around. And he basically just, again, plays games, politics being one of them. But that scene is so important because, and he mentions earlier that he had, forget Grandier, he had made a deal with the earlier mayor of Loudun to never touch the walls. Yeah. And he didn't want to go back on his word because he was a king and a king must uphold his word. But again, he doesn't really get involved. But remember, Grandier goes to visit him, and then we find out they had a really good audience and all that, blah, blah, blah. And you don't really think the king's going to do much. He shows up again. He shows up in disguise, and he shows the entire town what a charlatan the witchfinder is. Now, here's the funny thing. They're all sold on the witchfinder. They've decided. At first, they thought he was a joke. Now they've decided he's legit. The king just showed them. The king himself showed them all. In fact, he is a joke. And okay, it's all over. He'll leave in disgrace. No, the minute the king leaves, they all go right back. And it illustrates just how fickle the people are. Even when you could convince them they're wrong about something, the second you stop telling them, they'll go right back to doing it over again. And there's a lesson we could learn from today, huh?
Right. Yeah, and it's so true because, again, they are so easily swayed as people to do whatever, whatever factions in power, basically. So the king, like you said, he doesn't really care about the religion or doesn't care about the minor things, but because he knows he has power, if the cardinal comes to him, he's like, well, okay, like, you can't touch this city, but I'll let you do whatever else you want to do because you're going to be working for me anyway. And of course, the cardinal wants the king's okay because that would give him power. And that's basically, they're all positioning for some sort of power within a power. And so that's what really makes it interesting about the play here. And Grandier, of course, Oliver Reed's character, I really like him in this film, like just the character itself, for a couple of reasons. One, at first, he ends up, I forget who the girl belongs to, but it's a younger girl. He gets her pregnant. He's been having an affair with this young woman.
It's a magistrate. I think he'd be like what you would call the district attorney.
Yeah. And he doesn't get along with that guy anyway. So he's been banging his daughter and gets her knocked up. But what happens is she tells, she's in love with Grandier. This is a common thing where all these girls are just like, oh, he's so perfect. I'd go to hell for him. That's basically what they're saying. But this young girl is in love with him, but he's like, I'm not going to marry you. That's not happening. So he actually tells her, he's like, look, keep it a secret, but go find a good man, raise the kid or whatever, and be happy. She doesn't want to do that. She's basically, you could almost say, they didn't give an age, but I would guess at that time she'd be like 16 or 17, just because of her attitude and how she acted. So, he pushes her away, and that's kind of a bad thing because you just know it's going to backfire on you at some point. But then there's another girl, and I don't remember her name. I'm not sure who she is. She's the one that he ends up marrying. And I think it's Madeleine Dubrow. I think that's her.
Let's go with that. I must confess, I can't remember either.
Yeah. So, but this other woman like comes to him in confession and says that has desires. She's in love, and then she lets it slip that she's in love with him. And for whatever reason, like this is our first approach to her and Grandier as far as like a dynamic, and then Grandier admits that he's in love with her, like secretly. So now you see the other side of it. It's like, okay, one, this is a guy that's fallible, that can be seduced by young women. Probably has more than one lover before that young girl. But now he's like really in love with this other woman, and it's like he secretly marries her, which gets back to the nunnery, the convent, and that's when shit goes south. But his character, yeah, exactly, and I love that Redgrave just plays like a total lunatic in this, like she is. But there's something else, and I want you to kind of talk about it with me. Is despite everything that's going on with her, like her obsession with Grandier, her self-conscious thing about her body and the hump and everything, there's a moment where she's like crawling on her knees in front of the other girls, the other nuns, and she starts having visions. And so, like, to me, some of that is kind of interesting because I don't know if that's supposed to be taken as literal or just playing in her mind. How did you see that particular scene?
I know specifically the scene, and it could be taken either way. Frankly, when I watched the movie this time, I watched it with the intent or the point of view that she actually is mentally ill.
Okay.
Because that happened a lot at this time. A lot of the people who claimed to be possessed were in fact suffering from mental illness. That actually happens up until this day, I'm afraid. And again, I'm trying really hard not to go into politics here. So if I stumble upon it, I apologize to anybody I might offend. But
it's fine because it's a parallel. So
yeah. If you look at it, that Redgrave is in fact mentally ill, a lot of things suddenly add up, and the visions she's getting are her delusions, and it ends with that particular scene ends with a very, very, very amazing little counterpoint. She has clutching her rosaries, of course, has a cross on it. She clutches them so hard, she gives herself stigmata.
Yeah.
And there's a theory, because stigmata is a documented event that does happen throughout the centuries. But they think in many cases it was done inadvertently with things like crucifixes or any number of other things people were holding in their hand at the time. And I'm like, because that is usually associated with Christ, not with demonic possession, but she somehow put the two together, and it's just, and again, you can actually see it also when they speak with her. Sometimes she's lucid, sometimes she's kind of batshit. She always makes sense either way. So again, I always watch it with, she just doesn't have both oars in the water. Now, other people could see perhaps she was touched by some metaphysical entity on either side, but I think more than likely she wasn't wrapped too tight to begin with, and when her secret crush ended up betraying her, she was unable to reconcile it. It went boo.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point, because again, and I love how you explain it, because she's already dealing with the idea that, and it sort of goes with all the girls. They like you said earlier, they weren't just like said, hey, we're growing up, we're in a great Christian home, we're going to go to the convent and be a nun. These were girls from like broken homes. Oftentimes, like, they dealt with trauma just from whatever as kids and young girls. So this was, like you said, this is kind of like a place like, we're just going to stick you here so we don't have to deal with you. And so you have all these girls that are dealing with both sexuality, desire, lust, and then having the confliction of the prophecy and preaching of the good book. So I think that, Sister Jeanne is dealing with the same stuff like you just said. So she's trying to, and Grandier is kind of guilty of this too, where they're trying to twist their religion into a way that makes them okay to do with the things that they do.
They want to do, yeah.
Yes.
Funny how that works.
Right. So there was a couple of scenes though, and I don't know what to make of it. Maybe you can help me understand. Maybe it was just them, maybe Russell just trying to be shocking, but they might have another purpose. So there's these devices they were using. At first, I thought like maybe it was like for a douche, but one of them was used when they were trying to exorcise Jeanne together with the witch fire in them, and they were forcing her down there, and they were, you get the idea.
I do.
The other one was towards the end when she's in her little room and she's kind of doing something there. But the third one was like one of the guys that I guess are inventors of some of these devices they were using. So they like squirted some shit into the nun's mouth. I'm like, what is that? What is that supposed to be?
They were actually supposed to be doctors, and it's so funny. I was watching a documentary not long ago about medicine around this time, and they said if you were sick, the worst person you could see would be a doctor. First of all, they were basically just making crap up as they went. Second of all, they oftentimes were combining their medicine with old folk remedies or theories, and they were a form of enema. Yes, you hit that right on the head, and she was using it on herself later on for reasons I think we can all visualize. But oftentimes there's this idea that the demonic possession, it's like bleeding. You ever hear when they would like use razors and like because they were trying to bleed out?
Bloodletting.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. It's similar to that where the enemies were trying to purge the evil inside of you. And again, they were a couple of crackpots. Those guys who come up rather frequently. And one of the things I love about this movie, by the way, is it's listed as a horror. And it works really well as a historic drama. But it works as kind of a dark comedy. And those two Abbott and Costello types, one's named Adam, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what the other one's name is. But again, they come up with, you first see them, they were the ones who were trying to administer medicine to the girl that Grandier falls in love with, her mother, and they were killing her because they were trying to issue her medicine. They were also, and nothing very, very important in this film, by the way, is the historical backdrop. The 30 Years' War was going on, which basically burned Europe to the ground, particularly Germany. There was the Huguenot uprising. That was the French Protestants, which fought the French Catholics, who lost. But there was an outbreak of the Black Plague. And people were batshit because, like, oh, here we go again, because it's about 300 years and the plague is still making outbursts. And more about that later. But if you watch these guys closely, one of their duties was to gather up the dead bodies. And there's one scene where I guess they're on break and they're like eating their lunch over a cart full of dead plague victims.
Yeah.
So the short answer is they were doctors of a sense, quacks really, but also kind of perverts. So if you listen closely, they'll be like, this could work, couldn't it? They even do that later when they're charged with torturing Grandier. Where, hey, this hammer could help. I'm like, you are so sick. So anyway, yeah, on the surface, it was designed to sort of help exorcise demons.
Yeah, and the other cool thing is I know that both Redgrave and Reed have said that this is like one of their favorite films they ever did in their careers, which kind of goes back to what you said about how this is kind of portrayed more as a historical drama, because even Redgrave said she thought this was like one of the best post-war pieces of cinema that she ever worked on. So I think even they kind of look at it more as maybe a bit exaggerated historical drama, but like not really as much as a horror film, even though it has like some horror elements in it, you know.
Well, she got top billing too, and she deserved it. Mother Jeanne was an absolutely amazing character. She's the villain in a movie with a lot of villains in it, but again, it's a tragic villain, and she portrays it splendidly. She really does.
Yep. So what would you say is like your favorite part of the film overall?
Well, it's funny because it actually doesn't involve Oliver Reed. There's a scene, well, it's interspersed. Long story short, as we were discussing earlier, one of the main things going on, it wasn't just simply the church and state argument. It was the central government versus the provincial governments. And what Richelieu is doing is he's trying to centralize the forces, really because he's about to go to war with France and Germany, but more importantly because he wants total power in the state. And the only way he can do that is if he breaks the power of the local landed gentry. This is the main reason why the French later built Versailles. You had the king in the capital and the nobles of the sort of like local governments, so they kind of had all the power because they were the ones making the day-to-day decisions. Build Versailles, and if you don't come to Versailles to hang out, you're a country bumpkin. If you do come to Versailles, you've just left your estate, and now you've lost the only advantage you have. So, again, you really see the French trying to consolidate power, and this is done through Richelieu, who was a great Machiavellian ruler. And, of course, it all comes down to the fact he wants the walls to come down.
Yep.
And he's trying to convince the king to let him take down the walls. And the king, he's being a fop, and you think he's just doing target practice. And you later found out he's taken Huguenot prisoners, dressed them up as blackbirds, and is randomly shooting them because he's a psychopath. Yeah. But if you listen closely to Richelieu, he explains in vivid detail why the walls have to come down. And then again, the counterpoint is you see Grandier saying, no, we need the walls. So it's actually the main argument throughout the entire film. It's not about the religion. The religion becomes a bargaining chip that's used really by both sides. And then, if you'll indulge me, we wrap this up later on in the last scene with Redgrave and Dudley. Who Dudley is sort of the right-hand man. He's the sort of he's not the religious man. He's the go-to guy. He's the nuts and bolts. He's like basically a subcontractor in charge with destroying the walls. And the only reason he wants Grandier dead is so he can tear down the walls to Loudun. After it's done, he comes into Vanessa, and he comes in to hang out with Vanessa in her cloister. And she's like, well, so what happened? Was he mad or not? And he goes, oh, there was no confession, so he can't prove it. So everyone just sort of dropped the whole thing. Yeah. And he doesn't care because he never really cared whether Grandier was possessed or not. He was just doing his job. So after all this, the irony is it didn't really matter in the first place.
Yeah, that's a very kind of like somewhat jarring moment because, you know, he's saying, Grandier, he was actually innocent. He basically admitted it, and she knew it because she knew she was making shit up. But then he's like, but he was basically, as you said, he didn't really care either way. He's like, you know, you can just stay quiet and stay here, because that was basically like an underhanded warning that you're never going to speak of this to anybody. You're just going to keep doing your thing here. We're going to just between you and I, shh. And you're not possessed or anything. And, you know, as you said, Dudley was there for one purpose of his own. Again, it's that separate set of politics that everybody wants to play that basically position themselves. So Cardinal and the king get what they want. You know, Dudley gets what he wants, and I think the Witchfinder, he was almost at a point that he was enjoying taking over Grandier's like popularity at one point, because he became like, you know, the girls were all like flocking to him all of a sudden. So everyone kind of gets what they want out of this, and except for the nuns, really, they all kind of just get stuck back in the convent as is. But you know, again, there was an interesting thing where Grandier earlier in the film, and I didn't catch it the first few times I watched the film, which is strange because I've seen it about 5 times now. But he actually predicts his own death. He says, in order for me to do whatever or to rise above, I'm going to end up having to sacrifice myself. And I didn't catch that the first couple of times that I watched. I was like, oh, shit. So he'd already seen his end coming at some point. And of course, that would lead us, you know, to this scene where he gets burned alive, basically, and he has a wonderful speech at the end there. In this film,
listen to. That's the whole thing. Is that like we, the audience, are listening, but the actual people who were present at the time are too busy having revelry. And There was something, I don't know. Are you familiar with Diary of the Plague Years?
Not necessarily.
One of the things they talk about is the fact that death becomes so in your face, pun intended. People seem to like lose all sensitivity to it. It becomes almost like a sick joke. And like you show there's two characters you showed there. One, of course, being the guy with the glasses is of course the Witchfinder. The other guy is Father Mignon. And Mignon is interesting in the sense that he's actually the uncle of that girl who gets pregnant in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got an axe to grind against Grandier to begin with, but yet still, I don't know if has a crush on him or just is just still enamored by him. But even when he's condemning him, there's still this overwhelming guilt. There's a very interesting scene where he says, I need you to give me the kiss of peace and let me die, which apparently was a thing at the time. The Witchfinder won't do it, but Mignon yielding to public pressure because the crowd's like, kiss him, kiss him, kiss him. So he gives him the kiss so that he can die peacefully. The second he does it, the crowd starts calling him Judas because, of course, the infamous Judas kiss. And I'm like, wow. It's almost like the crowd had that queued up. And it was like watching people at a sporting event sort of jeering the people on the playing field. And the thing is, you get this in a post-pandemic world, and I can't help but think some of the people who I don't know, kind of revel in the pain of others online, I can't help but think are somehow also succumbing to that sort of what I call COVID cuckoo.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But it was, and then of course we find out later that Mignon can't reconcile the fact that he condemned Grandier, even though was he guilty? Was he didn't? Either way, he goes basket case, and they end up locking him up. He is this whole movie is a list of tragic characters. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point because Mignon, he's just another one that I felt that it was all about positioning. So he believes in in some ways in what Grandier was doing as far as like a representation of the religion they were following. But at the same time, like you said, when he got his niece pregnant, he's dealing with now this man who I've revered so much is, he's not really the devil, but he's actually done a sinful deed with my niece. And so, and now he won't honor that. You would think that in a perfect world, Grandier would be like, all right, well, I've slept with you. I made you pregnant. I'm going to marry you. Like that, you would think he would do the right thing. Now, I don't know if the rules for him, because like I said, he ended up getting married secretly, which maybe he's not allowed to because of his position. I can't remember. I'm assuming he's not allowed to get married, but
he would have to step down from being a priest in order to do so, and that does happen. Okay. But one thing about Grandier, and if you watch it closely, while he is a very strong character, very charismatic character, and oftentimes has the best interest of his flock at heart, he does a lot of things just because he feels like it.
Yeah, he does. And he talks a lot of shit, so that's part of the problem too, is there's that scene where he comes out of some castle that's been or at least some area that's been torn up, where because they were dealing with the plague too, so there was a girl that was dying from an illness, and they had a fucking alligator in the bed with her.
Oh yeah, those are the two charlatans.
Yeah, and so he throws it out the window, and then once he gets down there, the guy that I think is the father of the girl that got pregnant, they start having a war of words. Yeah, and he just and Grandier just starts laughing at him. I was like, yeah, you can't do anything to me. You can't do anything to me. Yeah. He just says, I got too much power, brother. You can't do anything. So it's really funny to kind of watch. Even Grandier knows, as you said, he kind of does what he wants. But he's a complicated man. I think that's what makes his character very complex in the film, is that, again, he goes from doing some of these awful things as this priest, and then on the other side of it, he's very thoughtful with the woman that he's in love with, that he marries, and he does have his own vision of a good town or city that he's leading, but in the end it's everyone around him that the ones that want to take that power away and strip him of it, that is downfall. So, what would be your final thoughts on the film, and also give me your rating out of 10 of this film?
My final thoughts are just, how should I put this? I found it to be an excellent amalgam of so many different threads and so many different points of view. If it wasn't for some of the redundantly graphic sex and violence, this might be a perfect film. I did think it kind of went overboard, and Ken Russell was doing that deliberately for shock value. But the messages, not simply message, the messages of this film make it really a cautionary tale. And if people could get past some of these things, I think it's worth it. Like I was joking with my wife this morning. It's a pity you couldn't get through all the sex and violence, because you would love this movie. But I think the message in it is more relevant today than it was in 1971, which is funny because it's from a story from the 17th century. So it just shows how timeless some of these dynamics have been going on. And as far as my rating goes, and I don't give this often, but I will give this film a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, and obviously Ken was playing up to the nunsploitation era with a lot of that extra, sex and violence in there. For me, I enjoy that mainly just because I love directors that kind of push the envelope, so it doesn't really bother me. But I can see where you're coming from. Like if you were to strip this film down more, take more of that stuff out, and then throw it back in theaters, I think you could actually draw in a crowd who would enjoy the film for that historical aspect rather than everything else that was kind of in there. If you kind of just weed it out a little more, you can still get the point across that you were talking about, how the film is not so much about the sexual violence, it's about everything else that's going on with the politics and the positioning and the characters themselves, and mental illness being one of those factors. So yeah, that's a very interesting point to take there with that. I love this film still. I do not regret ever buying it. I think I'm like you. I think this is an excellent film, and it's still a 10 out of 10 for me as well, without a doubt. Hard to believe it only made like 11 million in the box office, but it was 1971. So
it was banned in a lot of places at the time.
That too. And so it would be interesting. The more I think about it, if they actually did strip it down a little more and then try to re-release it, because you said it does reflect a little bit of what we deal with today. So like maybe throw it back out there so that it's not really offending too many people as far as like the extra graphic stuff, and stick with more of the points of like what's happening and why. So that'd be interesting if they ever thought about doing that. I don't think they ever will, but it's an excellent film. Great acting all the way around. So many great actors in this. Each one stands out. Like there's Monet, Dudley. They all have their own characters that you don't forget too easily. So I like that. There's some films sometimes when you watch where you have so many characters, but sometimes they blend together and you can't really separate them. So when you have a film like this where each one stands out, I really like that.
Well stated, yes, and I think everyone was at their best, and all the characters were distinct. That's a very good point.
No.
Oh, all right. So now, tomorrow. I'll be on the Unapologetic Geek. We're going to be talking about the best music videos of the 80s and 90s, and there were some good ones. And this is actually going to be part 2. We did it last week, and we found there was a whole bunch left over. And then tomorrow night at 7 Eastern Standard Time, I'll be doing just a general Q&A live chat. No big theme. There will be trivia. There's always trivia. And, of course, everyone is welcome.
Known for his trivia.
I'm a very trivial person. How about you? What else you got coming up? Self-promote for a change.
I haven't really set up my schedule yet, but obviously Ghouls at Midnight going into next week. My pick for myself is called St. Clair. Came out in last year, 2025. So I'll be doing a review for that with Mr. Tony the Dead. Then Saturday, at least that's on the schedule, Silver Screen Savants with Olvin. we are actually going to review the movie Wrong Turn from 2002, I think, with Liza Dushku. So that's pretty much what's on my horizon for the time being. As always, man, thank you so much for being here. I know we had a little bit of a technical difficulty there.
It's part of the fun.
But, yeah, it always is. For the rest of you, please go like and subscribe to Thrashpondo Pons. A lot of great content over there. He's a very cool dude. A lot of good fans over there for him on his channel. Also, like and subscribe to the Military Podcast if you want. If you enjoyed this, let us know your thoughts and feelings on The Devil's 1971. Fantastic movie. Can't say it enough. As we always do here on Vintage Cult Cinema, though, is when we close it out, I give like a little musical montage at the end to basically recap and give a tribute to the film that we just discussed. Thrash, again, thank you so much. Hang around afterwards, and then I'll say my goodbyes to you. But for the rest of you, enjoy the rest of your day and weekend, and we'll see you next time on the Military Radio Podcast.
Peace.
Like sharpened blades, faith becomes the mask they made.